There is a weapon so powerful that most people never discover it. Not because it's difficult to find, because it's difficult to use. It requires no strength, no money, no status, no words. It requires only one thing, and that one thing is the hardest thing in the world for most people. Silence. Not the silence of the defeated. Not the silence of someone who has nothing to say. The silence of someone who has decided, consciously, deliberately, that you are not worth a response. Think about the last time someone provoked you, said something designed to hurt, did something designed to destabilize you, waited, almost visibly waited, for your reaction. And what did you do? Did you defend yourself? Explain yourself? Argue? Fight back? Did you lose sleep? Send the message? Make the call? Did you let it live in your head for days? If the answer is yes, you gave them exactly what they wanted. You handed them the proof that they had power over you. Friedrich Nietzsche understood something about this that almost nobody in his time was willing to say, and almost nobody today is willing to fully apply. Stay until the end. Because the final lesson in this video is not about ignoring others. It's about what ignoring reveals about you. 1. The most dangerous thing you can do to a person. Most people believe the most powerful response to provocation is a devastating comeback, the perfect reply, the argument that wins the room, the message that finally makes them understand. Nietzsche would call this thinking small, because the comeback gives you satisfaction for a moment, but it gives them something far more valuable, your energy. It confirms their relevance in your world. It tells them, "You reached me." Now consider the alternative. Nothing. No reply, no reaction, no acknowledgement, just the sound of your complete, total, indifferent silence. This is not passive. This is not weakness performing as patience. This is one of the most aggressive things one human being can do to another. Because here is the psychological reality Nietzsche saw clearly. The deepest human need is not love, not safety, not money. It is significance. Every human being needs to matter, needs to register, needs to have an effect on the world around them. When you ignore someone completely, not with anger, not with drama, just with genuine indifference, you attack that need at its root. You are not saying, "I hate you." You are saying something far more devastating. You are irrelevant. And irrelevance for the human ego is worse than hatred. You can fight hatred. You can respond to anger. You can negotiate with conflict. But you cannot fight someone who doesn't notice you exist. 2. Why reaction is the real defeat. Nietzsche had a concept he returned to again and again. He called it ressentiment, the psychology of those who define themselves by their wounds. The person living in ressentiment cannot let things go. Every slight must be addressed. Every disrespect must be corrected. Every person who wronged them must eventually understand what they did. This feels like strength, like refusing to be a doormat. It is the opposite, because every time you react, you reveal something. You reveal that the other person has penetrated your inner world, that their words have weight inside you, that their opinion matters enough to disturb your peace. Think about what reaction actually communicates. When you argue back, you're saying, "Your words have power over me." When you explain yourself to someone who disrespected you, you're saying, "I need your understanding." When you obsess over what someone said, you're giving them rent-free space in the most valuable real estate you own, your mind. The untouchable person, the sovereign individual Nietzsche described, does not react, not because they don't feel, but because they have mastered the gap between feeling and responding. They feel the provocation. They register the disrespect. And then, nothing. Not performance, not suppression. Genuine indifference, earned through deep inner work. Because Nietzsche understood something essential. The person who controls their reaction controls the entire interaction. And the person who controls the interaction controls the relationship. And the person who controls the relationship always controls the outcome. 3. What silence reveals about the other person. Here is where the philosophy gets interesting, and where most people never arrive, because they're too busy reacting to observe. When you say nothing, do nothing, and simply watch, the other person begins to perform. This is not a theory. It is a predictable, consistent, almost mechanical pattern of human behavior. The person who expected a reaction and received none will escalate. First, they'll repeat themselves, louder, more aggressive, then they'll add justifications, explanations for why you should respond. Then, and this is the most revealing part, they'll begin to unravel. Because silence, to the person who craves control, is unbearable. They need your reaction to feel powerful. Without it, they are performing in an empty theater. Nietzsche wrote extensively about what he called the will to power. And he observed that those who seek power through the manipulation of others are, at their core, the weakest type of human, because their sense of power depends entirely on the compliance of those around them. Take away your compliance through silence, and their power structure collapses. You don't have to destroy them. You don't have to fight them. Just remove the audience and watch them destroy themselves. What they reveal in your silence is the truth of who they are. The insecurity, the need, the desperation. All of it surfaces because there is nothing left to perform against. Silence does not just protect you. Silence is a mirror, and most people cannot bear what they see in it. 4. The test of the truly strong. Nietzsche was brutal in his distinction between two types of people. He called them, in different ways throughout his work, the strong and the weak. Not physically, psychologically. The strong person, in Nietzsche's framework, defines themselves from within. Their values, their standards, their sense of worth, all generated internally. They do not need the approval of the room to feel valuable. They do not need the validation of their enemy to feel powerful. They do not need the last word to feel victorious. The weak person defines themselves in reaction to others. Their identity is a mirror, shaped by what other people think, say, and do, which means their identity can be destabilized the moment those external inputs change. Here is the test. When someone tries to provoke you and you react, who is in control? They are, because your behavior in that moment was determined by their action. You became the effect to their cause. You became reactive, which is another word for controllable. When someone tries to provoke you and you say nothing, who is in control? You are. Not because you didn't feel it, because you decided that your response was not theirs to trigger. This is the test of the truly strong. Not whether they can hit back hardest, whether they can choose not to, and feel nothing missing in that choice. The truly strong person does not need the confrontation to feel whole. They were already whole before it started. 5. The silence that builds versus the silence that shrinks. There is something critical to understand here. Because this is where the philosophy gets misapplied, and where people end up more damaged, not more powerful. There are two types of silence. They look identical from the outside. They are completely opposite in what they do to you. The first type of silence is avoidance. It comes from fear, from conflict aversion, from the deep, exhausting desire to just not deal with it. This silence shrinks you. Every time you use it, you confirm to yourself that you cannot handle confrontation. That peace must be kept at any cost. That your comfort depends on the absence of friction. This silence makes you smaller. The second type of silence is a decision. It comes from strength, from clarity, from having assessed the situation and concluded, this is not worth my energy. Not because you're afraid. Because you've won before the game started. Because you already know the outcome, and the outcome does not require your participation. This silence expands you. Every time you use it, you build the muscle of self-governance, the capacity to choose your responses rather than leak them. Nietzsche was obsessed with this distinction. He called it the difference between the slave who is silent because they are afraid, and the master who is silent because they have decided. The slave avoids the fight because the fight frightens them. The master avoids the fight because the fight is beneath them. The posture is identical. The inner reality is worlds apart. Ask yourself honestly, when you go silent, which type are you using? 6. What ignoring does to your own psychology. We have talked about what silence does to others. But Nietzsche was ultimately not a philosopher of how to handle other people. He was a philosopher of how to build yourself. And silence, practiced correctly, builds something in you that almost nothing else can. It builds proof. Every time you feel the provocation, feel the pull to react, and consciously choose not to, you prove something to yourself, that your peace is yours, that your attention is a resource you control, that you are not a machine that produces reactions on demand. This proof compounds. The first time is difficult, almost physically uncomfortable. The second time is slightly easier. By the 100th time, it becomes natural. Not because you've stopped feeling, because you've stopped being ruled by what you feel. This is what Nietzsche called self-overcoming, the daily, unglamorous practice of becoming someone who chooses, someone who responds rather than reacts, someone who is the author of their behavior, not the editor of their impulses. And here is the quiet revolution this creates in your life. When people realize you cannot be provoked, they stop trying. When people realize you cannot be manipulated through your reactions, they lose their most powerful tool. When people realize that your attention and energy must be earned, not triggered, they begin to treat you differently. Not because you demanded it, because you built it, quietly, invisibly. In every moment you chose silence over reaction. 7. The people who are truly beyond reach. You have met these people, maybe only once or twice in your life, but you remember them. They were not the loudest person in the room. They were not the most aggressive, not the most dominant. But there was something about them. When someone tried to needle them, they smiled, or they didn't. When someone tried to humiliate them, the humiliation somehow reflected back. When someone tried to destabilize them, the destabilization found no purchase. These are not people performing calm. These are people who have genuinely arrived somewhere most never reach. Nietzsche would call them the highest type, not because they are better than others in some moral sense, but because they have undergone the process he called becoming who you are. They have stripped away the need for approval. They have burned down the part of themselves that required the last word. They have done the long, difficult work of building a self that does not depend on external confirmation to exist. And this creates something almost supernatural in how the world responds to them. Because the world, people, can feel the absence of need. And the absence of need is the most disorienting thing one human can present to another. You cannot control someone who needs nothing from you. You cannot destabilize someone who is already completely stable. You cannot wound someone who has already healed. So people don't try, not out of fear, out of recognition. 8. The practical architecture of saying nothing. This is not abstract. This is applied. Here are 7 principles, not as inspiration, but as a daily practice. Principle 1. Not everything deserves a response. Train yourself to pause before reacting. Ask one question. Does engaging with this make my life better? Or does it just make me feel better for a moment? These are rarely the same thing. Principle 2. Remove yourself from the audience. Drama requires spectators. When you disengage, physically, digitally, emotionally, you remove the fuel. Most conflicts cannot survive without an audience. Be the person who quietly leaves the theater. Principle 3. Let time do the work you don't need to do. Most situations that feel urgent are not. Most provocations that demand an immediate response actually need none. Give it time. More often than you expect, the situation resolves or reveals itself without your intervention. Principle 4. Watch what surfaces in your silence. Use your silence as intelligence. The person who needed you to react will show you exactly who they are in your absence. Pay attention. People reveal their true character not when they're being observed, but when they believe they've been abandoned. Principle 5. Protect your inner world with absolute seriousness. Your thoughts, your peace, your attention, these are finite resources. Every person you allow to live rent-free in your mental space is displacing something more valuable. Guard your inner world the way you would guard your most important possession. Principle 6. Become comfortable with being misunderstood. The person who needs everyone to understand their silence, to know that it's a choice, not weakness, has not yet mastered silence. True silence does not require an explanation. It does not defend itself. It simply exists. Principle 7. Let your life be the response. Nietzsche's most enduring message was not about how to respond to your enemies. It was about what to do with your own existence. Build something. Become something. Live at a level that makes the noise beneath you inaudible. The best response to someone who doubted you is not an argument. It is a life they cannot argue with. 9. The final truth. Nietzsche wrote something that most people read once and forget, and then one day, usually after a moment of great pain, they understand it completely. He wrote that the secret of the greatest fruitfulness and the greatest enjoyment of existence is to live dangerously, not recklessly, dangerously. To risk the discomfort of silence when the world screams for reaction. To risk being misunderstood rather than over-explaining yourself into smallness. To risk the loneliness of self-governance rather than the cheap warmth of approval. This is the dangerous life Nietzsche meant, not skydiving. The daily terrifying choice to belong completely to yourself. To refuse to be triggered, to refuse to be defined by other people's provocations. To say nothing, not because you have nothing to say, but because you have decided that your silence is more powerful than their noise. Say nothing, do nothing, just watch. And what you will watch is this. The people who needed your reaction will slowly lose their power. The situations that seemed catastrophic will quietly resolve. The provocations that felt unbearable will reveal themselves as irrelevant. And you, slowly, invisibly, completely, will become someone different. Someone who cannot be reached by cheap provocations. Someone whose peace is self-generated and self-guarded. Someone the world has learned, without being told, not to test. Reactive people are controlled people. Silent people are free people. Choose your silence. Build your freedom. If this video spoke to something in you, it is because some part of you already knows this truth and is tired of reacting against your own best interests. If you want more content on Friedrich Nietzsche's philosophy, the psychology of power and self-mastery, human behavior, emotional discipline, and the invisible dynamics that determine the quality of your life, subscribe now. Because the person who understands themselves, truly, deeply, without illusion, is the person nobody can touch.